I grabbed my bag and walked out. A mocking laugh trailed after me. "You'll be crawling back to beg for favors tomorrow." It was 1:17 in the morning. Only 3 lights were still on the 6th floor of the School of Life Sciences building. The rest of the floor lay in darkness, the long hallway punctuated by the occasional hum of a refrigerator or the distant drip of a faulty faucet. I rubbed my burning, strained eyes, the dryness scraping against my lids like sandpaper. On the screen in front of me lay the midterm progress report for the National Key Research and Development Program, a project that officially belonged to Ethan Moore. I was only a temporary helper, and I'd barely finished a third of the document. My fingers ached from hours of typing, and my neck had stiffened into a permanent crick from hunching over the keyboard. Beside the laminar flow hood, a potted green plant swayed gently in the night breeze. I'd bought it myself from a local nursery the previous year, a small snake plant with crisp, upright leaves that had cost me $15 and brought a sliver of life into the sterile lab. Ethan had casually said he'd keep it at his workstation since his seat faced the window with better sunlight, and after that day, I'd never touched it again. He'd taken it without asking, really, just scooped it up one morning while I was running a PCR, and I'd said nothing. I'd said nothing because that was what I did back then. I said nothing, I took nothing, I asked for nothing. My phone vibrated once. "Ethan Moore, asterisk, thanks for covering. I'll treat you to dinner sometime, asterisk." Attached was a photo taken at a high-end Japanese restaurant downtown, the kind with no menu and a waiting list that stretched 3 months. The hem of a silk dress peeked into the frame, champagne-colored, expensive, along with an Omega watch on a woman's wrist, the diamond bezel catching the warm light of a private dining room. I knew that watch well. Just a month ago, Ethan had borrowed $700 from me during the lab dinner, claiming he was short on cash. He'd been so earnest, so convincingly embarrassed, patting my shoulder and promising to pay me back the very next week. He never did. I didn't reply. I saved the document and renamed it meticulously, Clara Bennett _temporary assistance Ethan Moore crop stress resistance, midterm report. I stared at the file name for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Something cold and final settled in my chest, like a stone dropping into still water. This was the 3rd time. The first time had been a year prior. Ethan had tearfully told everyone his grandmother had passed away and that he needed to rush home for the funeral. He'd stood in the middle of the lab, his voice cracking, his eyes red-rimmed, and I'd felt such a surge of pity that I'd volunteered before anyone else could. I'd pulled 2 all-nighters to finish the supplementary experimental data for his SCI paper, drinking stale coffee and watching the sunrise paint the lab windows in shades of pale orange. Later, a junior lab mate had casually mentioned that Ethan had shown up at the lab punctually every single day during that supposed morning period, more reliable than the building's time clock. His grandmother, it turned out, was alive and well and living in Florida. The second time was 6 months ago. He'd appeared distraught, red-rimmed eyes and all, saying his wife had gone into premature labor and he had to stay by her side at the hospital. I'd volunteered to take his place on a critical field sampling trip up north, packing my bags before dawn and catching a train that left me exhausted and cold. Yet while I waited at the train station, shivering in the drafty terminal, I saw his vacation post pop up on social media. He was in Florida, captioning the photos a belated honeymoon trip with his wife. The sand was white, the water was turquoise, and his smile was wide and untroubled. I'd sat there for an hour, staring at that photo, feeling something shift inside me that I hadn't quite been able to name. "You're such a kind person, Clara." He'd patted my shoulder lazily back then. "I'll definitely treat you to a fancy meal soon." Staring at the unfinished report, I suddenly recalled the words my doctoral supervisor had told me at graduation. The biggest foolishness in academia is treating other people's laziness as your own chance to advance. I'd nodded at the time, understanding the words intellectually, but it had taken 3 years of being used, manipulated, and discarded to truly feel their weight in my bones. I saved the file, powered off the computer, and pulled out my USB drive. The drive was small and unremarkable, a simple silver stick I'd bought from the campus bookstore for $12. But on it, I'd spent the last 3 months secretly compiling every piece of evidence I could find, every altered data point, every falsified record, every email and reimbursement form that told a different story than the one Ethan had carefully constructed. I slipped it into my bag and zipped it shut. As the elevator descended steadily, its quiet hum the only sound in the empty building, I sent a message to Fiona Carter, a senior alumna I hadn't contacted in 3 years. Fiona, does the National Science Foundation's midterm review team need additional reviewers? She replied instantly. We do. But you need at least an associate senior researcher title. Wait, did you get promoted? End of last year. Meet me downstairs at the Foundation office tomorrow morning. Coffee's on me. A faint, knowing smile tugged at my lips. The 28-story National Science Foundation building was exactly the institution funding Ethan's high-profile crop stress resistance project. The very project he'd been dumping all his work on me to complete. I stepped out of the elevator and into the cool night air, the campus empty and still. Above me, the Life Sciences building loomed dark and silent, except for those 3 stubborn lights on the 6th floor. I wondered, briefly, if any of them belonged to people like me, people who stayed late and worked hard and never said no. Then I turned and walked away, and I didn't look back. It was 8:47 the next morning. I'd already brewed my second cup of coffee at my lab station, the familiar bitter aroma filling my small corner of the room. My eyes felt clearer now, the exhaustion of the night before replaced by a sharp, focused alertness. I'd slept only 4 hours, but it had been a deep, dreamless sleep, the kind that comes after you've finally made a decision you've been avoiding for years. Ethan sauntered in, his leather shoes polished to a flawless shine, his hair perfectly styled. Right behind him came Ava Brooks from the administrative department, their heads bent close as they whispered. Ava's shrill, tinkling laughter scraped against my eardrums like shards of broken glass. Just last week, she'd been complaining to me privately that Ethan was so cheap he even split dating bills down to the penny. He'd made her pay for her own coffee on their first date, she'd told me, her voice dripping with indignation. And yet here she was, trailing after him like a devoted puppy. Morning, Clara. Ethan tossed his backpack onto a chair, and the leaves of the potted green plant brushed his sleeve. He frowned and pushed the pot aside in obvious distaste. Did you send the report to my inbox? I did. I kept my eyes fixed on the electrophoresis gel image spread out before me, my voice calm and even. I copied Director Larson too. Ethan's expression froze mid-motion. His hand hovered in the air, caught between reaching for his coffee mug and reaching for his keyboard. The color drained from his face, replaced by a pale, sickly pallor. Director Larson was famously strict, the toughest administrator in the entire school. He had zero tolerance for uncredited behind-the-scenes work and covert name-hitching among faculty members. His reputation preceded him. He had personally dismantled 2 separate academic fraud rings in the past 5 years, and his investigations were thorough, relentless, and devastating. Ethan dumping his core project workload on me was a blatant violation of academic rules. I'd covered for him the previous 2 times, writing only vague notes in the official emails that I had assisted with partial experimental procedures. This time, I'd told the whole truth in black and white. I'd written clearly that I had completed the entirety of the official midterm report on Ethan Moore's behalf, attaching detailed sources for every set of experimental data. What is your problem? Ethan lowered his voice sharply, his fingers tapping aggressively against the partition separating our workstations. His knuckles were white, his jaw tight. Are you picking a fight? I finally lifted my gaze to meet his furious eyes, calm and unyielding. I'd spent years looking away from him, years avoiding confrontation, years swallowing my own frustration. But today I held his gaze steady. The project team requested all raw experimental data last night at 9. I've submitted everything. Feel free to double-check for missing content. His face drained of color as he spun around to boot up his computer. I watched his fingers fly across the keyboard, watched the tremor in his shoulders as he opened his email. Ava sidled over to my desk, her overpowering floral perfume stinging my nostrils, a cloying mix of jasmine and something synthetic that made my eyes water. Clara, Ethan said you left early last night. That midterm report is extremely important for his project evaluation. That's why he needs to submit it himself. I smiled faintly. After all, he's the official project principal investigator. Ethan's computer pinged sharply. His shoulders stiffened, and the back of his neck flushed bright red as he stared rigidly at the screen. I could see his reflection in the dark monitor glass, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and rage. I knew exactly what he was seeing. At the very end of the report, I'd added a formal supplementary note. After thorough cross-verification, I have identified an 18.3% deviation between the gene expression data listed in the official report and the original recorded experimental results, with an official recommendation for full data recheck and verification. That 18.3% discrepancy was what I'd painstakingly uncovered over 3 sleepless nights, sorting through years of Ethan's handwritten experimental logs. His handwriting was sloppy, his records disorganized, but the numbers didn't lie. To secure a passing midterm evaluation, Ethan had cherry-picked the most favorable results from 3 repeated trials, discarded all inconsistent data, and even digitally altered his electrophoresis gel images. I'd spent hours comparing his published results to his raw data, line by line, and the pattern was unmistakable. Clara. Ethan shot abruptly to his feet, his chair crashing backward into my centrifuge rack. Brown EB staining liquid spilled across the clean lab bench, a dark, spreading stain that pooled around my pipettes and spread toward my keyboard. Before I could react, his fingers clamped tight around my wrist, his grip bruising and furious. His nails dug into my skin, and I felt the sharp sting of broken flesh. You set me up on purpose. The entire lab fell dead silent. Every head turned toward us, every pair of eyes wide and watching. I could feel the weight of their gazes, the collective held breath of a dozen people frozen in the middle of their morning routines. Director Larson's office door swung open. He swept his gaze over the messy, stained bench, then fixed his sharp eyes on the red bruise forming on my wrist. His expression was unreadable, but I saw his jaw tighten. Ethan Moore. My office now. Clara Bennett, you too. The rich, earthy aroma of aged pu'er tea lingered in Director Larson's ceramic cup as he slid a stack of printed documents across his desk toward me. The tea was dark and strong, the kind he brewed only for important meetings. I'd been in his office once before, 3 years ago, when I'd first joined the department. He'd offered me tea then too, and I'd been too nervous to drink it. You found the data anomalies, he asked quietly. I glanced over the papers. They were printed copies of my late-night email submission, with every irregular data point highlighted in bright red font. Someone had been thorough. Someone had taken my raw submission and annotated it with additional notes and cross-references, turning it from a simple complaint into a fully documented investigation. It was incidental, I replied evenly. While organizing project materials for Ethan, I noticed inconsistent CT values for internal reference genes in the qPCR test results, which conflicted with the experimental group data. Director Larson tapped his fingers slowly against his desk. In his early 50s, his hair was always neatly combed, and his gaze behind his thin-rimmed glasses was as precise and incisive as a high-resolution scanner. He studied me for a long moment, his fingers continuing their slow rhythm against the polished wood. Ethan claims you tampered with the data deliberately last night to frame a colleague. I said nothing, simply pulled out my phone and pressed play on an audio recording. Asterisk, just cover for me this once. Tell Director Larson I had a family emergency. I'll make it up later. Asterisk. Ethan's oily, pleading voice echoed through the speaker, layered with the faint background noise of the lab pantry, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant clatter of someone washing glassware. I paused the playback. That was last March. There are 19 more recordings documenting similar requests. Would you like me to play them all? Director Larson's brows lifted slightly. He leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly beneath him. You've been preparing for this for a long time. Only self-preservation. I slipped my phone back into my bag. If the school requires a full investigation, I can compile a complete audit of all experimental data from every project Ethan has led. The steady thud of piling construction piles from the building opposite drifted through the window, slow and rhythmic. The sound had been a constant companion for the past 6 months, a dull percussion that had driven me to distraction during long nights in the lab. But now it felt almost soothing, a reminder that things were still moving, still changing, even when it felt like I was trapped in place. Director Larson suddenly smiled, opening his desk drawer and pulling out an official transfer document. The review team lead at the National Science Foundation emailed me first thing this morning. They're conducting full midterm project audits and want to recruit a molecular biology specialist to assist with data verification. He pushed the document toward me. Fiona's bold, looping signature blazed across the header. Your senior alumna? Yes. The terms she negotiated on your behalf, Director Larson said, wiping his glasses slowly. Double your current salary and benefits package. I picked up the document without glancing at the salary figures. My eyes locked on the project verification list printed in bold font. Asterisk crop stress resistance, molecular mechanism research asterisk, Ethan Moore's signature project. The $3 million key national research grant the school had proudly secured the previous year. The grant had been a feather in the department's cap, a source of pride and prestige that Ethan had leveraged into a promotion and a corner office. I'd like some time to consider. Take all the time you need. He replaced his glasses, his tone turning stern again. But Ethan's situation requires a final resolution today. The supplementary data the project team requested last night is still unsubmitted on his end. I stood straight from my chair. That data was never part of my job responsibilities. I will fully cooperate with any official investigation the school initiates. I reached the office door before Director Larson spoke again. Do you know why Ethan kept pushing work onto you, Clara? I turned back. He did it because you never said no. He tucked the transfer agreement back into his drawer. Academia is no charity. Kindness without edge is just weakness. I stood there for a moment, his words settling into my chest like stones. Kindness without edge. I'd thought I was being helpful, generous, a good colleague. I'd thought that if I worked hard enough, sacrificed enough, proved myself enough, someone would finally notice. Instead, I'd just become a convenient tool, a resource to be used and discarded. I walked out of his office and didn't look back. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, Ethan's workstation was completely empty. School administrative staff were packing up his personal belongings. Someone had carelessly tossed the potted green plant into a waste bin, the leaves crumpled and sad. I paused beside the trash bag and lifted it out. Most of its leaves were wilted and limp, drained of all vitality. The soil was bone-dry, cracked and parched. Ethan had never watered it once in all the months he'd kept it at his desk. Clara. Ava stormed out of the pantry, her diamond nail glittering sharply under the lab lights. Her heels clicked against the linoleum floor, sharp and accusatory. How could you be so cruel? Ethan said you deliberately sabotaged him, got his project revoked, and now he's suspended pending investigation. I set the plant gently on the windowsill and poured a cup of water over its parched soil. The water soaked in slowly, the dry earth pulling it down in greedy gulps. He's suspended for academic fraud and data falsification, I corrected calmly. That has nothing to do with me. Don't play innocent. Ava's voice rose to a shrill, accusatory shout. Everyone in the department knows you've had a crush on Ethan for years. You couldn't win him over, so you destroyed his career out of petty jealousy. You're disgusting. A small crowd of onlookers had gathered at the lab doorway. I finished watering the plant, set down my cup, and turned to face her steadily. The heat of their stares pressed against my back, but I kept my shoulders straight and my voice level. I have a crush on him? I repeated flatly. Of course you do. Ava crossed her arms disdainfully. You peeled shrimp for him at the team building event. You stayed up rewriting his presentation slides for his promotion review. I peeled shrimp for him, I cut her off coolly, because he's severely allergic to shellfish and was too embarrassed to admit it in front of the whole team. I paused, letting that sink in. I fixed his presentation slides because he begged me to help him secure his associate professor promotion, which he needed for career advancement. And you know what he gave me in return? A Starbucks gift card with $12 left on it. I took one slow step forward, and Ava instinctively flinched backward. Her back hit the edge of a lab bench, and she gripped the countertop for support. Do you know why Ethan always came to me for favors, Ava? My voice was quiet, but clear enough for every watching ear to catch. It was never because I liked him. It was because I was convenient. Free labor. No favors owed, no money spent, available at any hour, and trustworthy enough to keep all his secrets. Ava's face blanched pale. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The look on your face right now, I murmured with a faint smile, is exactly the same look Ethan had in Director Larson's office this morning. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Fiona's name flashed across the screen. Are you free tonight? My supervisor wants to meet you for dinner. I answered the call directly in front of Ava. I'm free. Send me the address. As I hung up and slung my bag over my shoulder to leave, Ava screamed after me, "What do you even have to be proud of? The foundation's just going to stick you in some trivial entry-level admin job." I didn't look back. The elevator doors slid shut. A new message popped up from Fiona instantly. Asterisk, my boss is extremely interested in your profile. By the way, his name's Sebastian Grant. He's the one overseeing all of Ethan's ongoing project audits. Asterisk. I stared at the name for a moment. Sebastian Grant. The name was familiar from Foundation documents and industry whispers, a rising star in the academic funding world, known for his sharp mind and even sharper negotiating tactics. I'd never met him, but I'd heard the rumors. He was the kind of person who could make or break careers with a single phone call. I typed back, "I'll be there." The dinner reservation was at an exclusive riverside private club, quiet and upscale, with no printed menus, only seasonal chef specials. The uniformed waitstaff finished serving the final course of crab meat lion's head dumplings before Fiona excused herself to take a work call, leaving only Sebastian and me in the private dining room. The room was paneled in dark wood, the windows floor to ceiling, offering a sweeping view of the river at twilight. The lights of the city reflected off the water in shimmering fragments, and the distant sound of a ferry horn drifted through the glass. Dressed in a tailored gray cashmere sweater, Sebastian looked barely 40 years old. The Patek Philippe watch on his wrist cost more than my 3 years of combined salary. His features were sharp and angular, with high cheekbones and a strong jaw, but his eyes were what held my attention, cool and assessing, like he was cataloging every detail of my appearance and demeanor. "You have extensive familiarity with the crop stress resistance project," he asked without preamble, his tone calm and businesslike. "I've conducted in-depth research on all its operational details." Enlighten me. Ethan selectively retained only the most favorable trial data from 3 repeated experiments and discarded inconsistent results entirely, I stated methodically, picking up my chopsticks to take a small bite of steamed fish. The flesh was delicate and perfectly cooked, seasoned with ginger and scallion. He fabricated 12 sets of external collaborative test data to inflate project outcomes. Additionally, of the 3 million grant funds allocated to the project, only 2.1 million officially entered the research account. The remaining 900,000 was diverted within 48 hours of foundation disbursement, split into 7 transfers across 4 private personal accounts. 2 of those accounts ultimately funneled funds to a single beneficial owner with the surname Carter. I paused briefly, meeting his sharp, unreadable eyes. Sebastian's chopsticks froze midair. The piece of dumpling he'd been about to lift hovered forgotten between his fingers. The entire room fell silent save for the distant horn of river cruise ships drifting across the water. Fireworks burst far down the shore, scattering golden light across the floor-to-ceiling glass windows. I watched his face carefully, searching for any flicker of emotion, but his expression remained perfectly composed. "Where did you obtain this information?" His voice remained steady, but he set down his utensils completely. "I sorted and organized all project reimbursement documents for Ethan during my temporary assistance." I pulled a silver USB drive from my bag and set it on the rotating dining tray, sliding it gently toward him. Original experimental logs, formal reimbursement vouchers, internal email correspondence, all electronically notarized with traceable official timestamps, fully admissible for institutional audit. He stared at the drive without reaching for it immediately. His fingers rested on the edge of the table, perfectly still. What do you want in return? A formal position at the foundation, I answered plainly. And full independent audit authority over the entire crop stress resistance project. Full audit authority? A faint, knowing smile tugged at his lips. Do you understand what that entails, Ms. Bennett? It means I have full legal clearance to thoroughly investigate every irregular action Ethan Moore has committed, I replied calmly, returning his smile. Sebastian picked up the USB drive and slipped it into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. The movement was smooth and deliberate, like a chess player making a calculated move. Fiona told me you earned your Associate Senior Researcher title last year, he said. She failed to mention you're proficient in electronic forensic notarization, a hobby I cultivated in my spare time. He stood and extended his hand toward me, his grip dry, firm, and decisive. Be at my office at 9 tomorrow morning. Bring all original professional certification documents. I shook his hand firmly. Aren't you curious about my motives for all of this, Mr. Grant? He walked toward the door, glancing back at me as another firework bloomed brilliantly behind him, gilding the sharp lines of his profile in warm gold light. The colors reflected in his eyes, softening his expression for just a moment. I don't concern myself with motives, he said. Only results. The door clicked shut behind him. I finished the remaining dumplings slowly, savoring each bite. My phone lit up with a new message from Director Larson. School administration will handle Ethan's case internally. Come submit your resignation paperwork whenever you're available. I ignored the message, opened my camera, and took a photo of the empty plate. I posted it to my social media with a simple caption, 3 strikes. No more favors, My location tagged the exclusive Riverside Club under Grant Capital. 3 minutes later, Ava's comment appeared beneath my post, sharp and venomous, shameless. Slept your way to the top, I screenshot the comment and saved it securely. Fiona pushed open the dining room door and raised an eyebrow seeing my screen. Already got people frothing at the mouth? Just waiting for the main reaction. I locked my phone and stood up. The next morning, I stepped into the towering lobby of the National Science Foundation building when rapid, frantic high heels sounded behind me. Ava appeared with messy, disheveled hair, clutching her phone tightly. The screen displayed a desperate message Ethan had sent her at 3 a.m. Find Clara immediately. She has evidence that can destroy me. She grabbed my arm tightly, her eyes red and swollen with panic. Her nails, those same diamond-studded nails that had glittered so brightly in the lab, dug into my sleeve. What did you do to Ethan? He said you're framing him. The elevator doors opened mid-sentence. Sebastian's assistant stepped forward promptly, professional and poised. She was tall and composed, dressed in a crisp navy suit that screamed quiet competence. Ms. Bennett, Mr. Grant has been waiting for you. Ava's face drained completely of color. Her fingers slowly loosened from my sleeve as she stared at the Grant Foundation name printed on the assistant's formal ID badge. I smoothed the wrinkles from my blazer sleeve, pulled a formal document from my bag, and held it up. Bold black font emblazoned across the cover read, Official Special Audit Authorization, Crop Stress Resistance Project. I lowered my voice to a whisper only she could hear. Do you know why Ethan's terrified? I watched her pupils dilate with pure, unbridled fear. Because the first name listed as the ultimate beneficiary of that $900,000 fund diversion is Julian Carter. Ava's lips trembled violently, no sound escaping her throat. She did not recognize the name, but raw terror flashed across her face instantly, the fear of confronting power she could never hope to challenge, the fear of realizing she had spent months attacking someone infinitely above her station. The elevator doors glided shut slowly. In my final glimpse, Ava stood frozen in the center of the lobby, her phone dark and useless in her trembling hands, every ounce of her arrogance stripped away. The 28th floor offered an unobstructed panoramic view of the city's academic district. I had spent 3 years trapped in the tiny, insignificant capillary of that system, slaving away silently in a 6th-floor lab, pouring my time, energy, and expertise into fueling someone else's success. From up here, I could see the entire campus spread out below me, the buildings small and neat and orderly, like a model city. I could see the life sciences building, the 6th-floor windows, the very spot where I'd spent countless nights hunched over Ethan's work. Miss Bennett. Sebastian's assistant handed me a glass of warm water. Mr. Grant is finishing a short meeting and will be with you in 10 minutes. You may review this confidentiality agreement in the meantime. I took the document, flipped straight to the signature page without reading a single clause, and pulled out my pen. The assistant looked momentarily stunned. You don't wish to review the terms first? Your legal team's hourly rate far exceeds my monthly salary, I replied simply. There's no point in wasting time. My pen hovered over the signature line just as the office door opened. Sebastian walked in with 3 senior staff members, 2 male legal directors, and a female audit supervisor, all in formal dark suits. His gaze landed on my poised pen, and a faint, genuine smile touched his lips. You're confident. Your foundation is in a hurry to resolve this crisis, I corrected, signing my name cleanly and sliding the agreement across the desk. The midterm evaluation deadline is at the end of the year. If unauthorized data fraud is uncovered by external auditors, the Foundation faces full grant repayment penalties and secondary regulatory liability. The 2 legal staff members' expressions shifted sharply. I recognized their faces from National Academic Summit photos the previous month. They exchanged a quick glance, their professional composure cracking just slightly. $3 million principal grant, 8% annual irregular violation interest, I calculated steadily. Triple penalty compensation per federal regulatory standards. Mr. Grant, you know the exact cost better than anyone. Sebastian dismissed his team with a subtle gesture. Once the door closed completely, his formal corporate mask slipped, leaving his features relaxed and unguarded. He sat down across from me, his posture shifting from commanding to conversational. Julian Carter is my maternal uncle. I know. You understand this, yet you still chose to confront me? I chose to negotiate with you, I clarified. Precisely because you know the truth. I pulled a second silver USB drive from my bag and placed it on his desk. This is the full encrypted backup of all evidence. He stared at the drive, his tone sharp. Are you threatening me? I'm offering a comprehensive solution. I leaned forward slightly, calm and unyielding. I can ensure full recovery of the diverted $900,000 funds without public regulatory scandal. My conditions are full access to every project Ethan has ever led, plus the complete list of his institutional connections and collaborative networks. Sebastian's fingers tapped steadily against his desk, the rhythmic cadence identical to Director Larson's. For a moment, I wondered if all-powerful men shared the same habits, the same tells, the same way of buying time while they calculated their next move. You intend complete elimination? I intend professional accountability, I corrected firmly. I want repayment for 3 years of unpaid overtime, out-of-pocket reagent fees I covered for Ethan, and every academic opportunity he stole from me. Total compensation, $52,000. I don't want cash. I want full institutional accountability. I pulled up an Excel spreadsheet on my phone, displaying a detailed network diagram I had compiled overnight. 37 names were listed meticulously: school administrators, lab colleagues, supply vendors, even restaurant owners Ethan regularly patronized, each annotated with detailed frequency of interest-based transactions and collaborative favors. The diagram was a web of connections, a map of influence and corruption that stretched across the entire academic ecosystem. Sebastian studied the document for a long while. His eyes moved slowly across the screen, absorbing every detail. How long have you been preparing this? Ever since the second time he manipulated me into covering his failures. I locked my phone. First rule of academia: always preserve original experimental records. Second rule: always identify your opponent's fatal vulnerabilities. He extended his hand again. Welcome to Grant Foundation, Clara. You're appointed project lead, reporting directly to me. Effective tomorrow, you take full charge of all crop stress resistance project crisis resolution. Our hands clasped firmly. Additionally, he added, I require full case closure by the end of this week. No institutional rumors circulating before the annual Foundation Summit. Full voluntary confession and complete case file by Wednesday, I stated confidently. I will ensure Ethan submits a full formal statement of his own accord. Wednesday morning at 10, in the school's official conference room. I stood behind the one-way observation glass, watching Ethan slump in the leather conference chair he had once occupied with pride and arrogance. 3 days of unrelenting pressure had left him with deep dark circles under his eyes, his tie askew, and a faint lipstick stain on his collar, an unfamiliar shade, not Ava's. He looked diminished somehow, smaller than I remembered, his shoulders hunched and his hands clasped tightly together on the table in front of him. Where is Clara? He demanded of Director Larson for the third time, voice tight with impatience. She said she would explain everything in person. Director Larson stared silently at his case files, refusing to acknowledge him. The only sound was the scratch of his pen as he made notes in the margins. I pushed open the conference room door and sat directly across from Ethan, placing a voice recorder precisely in the center of the table. Ethan's arrogance crumbled into bitter rage the second he saw me. Look who's here. Foundation errand girl thinks she's important enough to sit in official department meetings now. I pressed play on the recorder without acknowledging his taunt. Asterisk, that 900,000 is safe. My uncle's connections will never let the audit dig that deep. Asterisk. Ethan's own smug voice echoed clearly through the conference room speakers. His face bleached white instantly. He lunged forward to snatch the recorder, only to be pinned back by Director Larson's firm grip on his shoulder. This is edited footage, he roared frantically. Clara, you fabricated evidence to ruin me. I spread stacks of printed official documents across the table one by one, each page detailing concrete violations. June 17th last year, $200,000 project transfer to More Biological Consulting, a shell company registered under your cousin's name. September 3rd, $300,000 fictitious collaborative testing fees funneled directly into your personal stock trading account. November 12th. Enough. Ethan slammed his fist on the table, his chair crashing backward. His chest heaved, his face flushed with rage and humiliation. What do you want? Money? Do you want me to kneel and apologize? I lifted my gaze to his panicked face, recalling those countless early mornings and midnight shifts I'd spent slaving over his work, while he lazily patted my shoulder and promised a meal he never intended to deliver. I remembered the exhaustion, the frustration, the quiet fury that had built up over years of being taken for granted. I want a full written statement, I said quietly, sliding a blank formal declaration form toward him. Document every academic violation, fund diversion, and procedural breach you've committed over the past 3 years, signed and officially notarized. In exchange, I will recommend the Foundation waive all criminal prosecution charges. His pupils contracted sharply with desperate hope. You have the authority to promise that? I don't. I spoke honestly. But Sebastian Grant does. And right now, Sebastian Grant listens to me. All the strength drained from Ethan's body. He collapsed weakly into his chair, his head dropping forward, his shoulders shaking with a silent sob. Director Larson pressed a pen into his trembling hand, but he hesitated, frozen and terrified. We were lab mates for 5 years, Clara, he rasped, voice broken. We worked side by side. We shared reagents, we shared coffee, we shared. 3 strikes, I replied flatly. You taught me that rule yourself. I tolerated the first 2 betrayals. The 3rd time, I learned to fight back. The moment he pressed pen to paper, I stood and left the conference room. In the hallway, Ava was being restrained by administrative staff. She erupted into hysterics the second she saw me, surging forward. What did you do to Ethan? Give him back. I stepped neatly aside. Her manicured nails scraped 3 thin white lines across my white lab coat. I looked down at the marks, then back at her face. Her tears had smeared her mascara into dark streaks down her cheeks. Do you know why Ethan chose you, Ava? I smoothed my coat calmly. She froze, staring at me in bewildered fury. Because you're even cheaper than I am. I spoke without malice, only plain truth. At minimum, I demanded repayment for my labor. You gave everything for free. The elevator doors closed shut, drowning out her broken sobs and Director Larson's sharp reprimands. Ethan's official confession turned out far more comprehensive than I had anticipated. In addition to fully admitting data falsification on the crop stress project, he voluntarily disclosed vendor bid rigging, fake collaborative acceptance reports, and how he had exploited Ava's administrative access to steal competing researchers' grant application materials. The confession was 19 pages long, each page a new revelation, a new betrayal, a new layer of corruption that I hadn't even suspected. Unexpected auxiliary evidence. I handed the complete case file to Sebastian. I recommend full submission to academic disciplinary authorities as a landmark case for institutional academic reform. Sebastian flipped through the thick stack of documents, his frown deepening progressively. The pages rustled softly in the quiet of his office, the only sound the occasional turn of a sheet and the distant hum of traffic from the street below. You knew the full scope of his violations all along? I suspected. I leaned against his office window overlook. Greed is systemic. A person willing to falsify experimental data will never stop at one violation. He closed the case file and studied me intently. His eyes searched my face, looking for something I couldn't quite identify. Have you considered what would have happened if I hadn't intervened? I stared down at the campus building where I'd wasted 3 years of my life. From this height, it looked so small, so insignificant, just another gray block among 100 others. I would have waited, I said calmly. Waited for his greed to trigger a larger failure, or waited for the annual mandatory audit to expose his fraud. His falsified data could not sustain permanent inspection. I had irrefutable evidence either way. Sebastian fell silent for a long moment. He turned to look out the window beside me. His reflection ghost Sebastian fell silent for a long moment. He turned to look out the window beside me, his reflection ghostly in the glass. The city stretched out below us, a vast grid of lights and shadows, each building containing its own small dramas, its own quiet betrayals. You remind me of my father. Your father. He built this foundation, he said quietly. He mastered patience, waiting for opponents to self-destruct, waiting for perfect timing before striking decisively. But chronic stress and constant vigilance gave him a fatal heart attack at 52. I remained quiet, letting him speak. There was something raw in his voice, something unguarded that I hadn't heard before. That's why I don't wait anymore. He turned back to me, his gaze sharp and decisive. Grant Foundation operates on proactive action, not passive patience. I'm offering you a choice. He slid a new project authorization file across his desk. Standard Resolution Protocol. Revoke project funding, recover all misappropriated grants, impose personal academic sanctions, and reach closed-door settlement with the university. The Alternative Non-Standard Protocol. He tapped the document's header. Establish the Crop Stress Research Team as an independent foundation laboratory. You serve as principal investigator, with a 3-year performance covenant requiring 3 published CNS journal subpapers. I scanned the formal terms thoroughly. The document was dense with legal language, but I understood the implications immediately. This wasn't just a job offer, this was a platform. A stage. A chance to build something that was entirely mine. What happens to Ethan? Disciplinary authorities have filed formal charges. Sebastian's tone remained impassible. His violations extend far beyond academic misconduct. Ava filed a formal police report yesterday. He circulated private explicit media without consent, with multiple unidentified victims coming forward. I thought of Ava's arrogant glittering nails, her vicious accusations, her desperate please moments earlier. The girl who had once mocked me for chasing unobtainable success had been trapped in a far darker, more helpless abyss. I wondered how long she'd been hiding that secret, how many nights she'd lain awake staring at the ceiling, too afraid to speak. I choose the non-standard protocol. Sebastian's brows lifted slightly. No hesitation? I've already considered every variable. I signed the document firmly. Non-standard challenges yield non-standard rewards. I need independent funding, institutional platform, and the authority to prove every person who underestimated me wrong. He extended his hand once more. Welcome to the core leadership team, Clara. Report to the new laboratory tomorrow morning. My assistant will transfer all project resources and documentation. Our hands parted. I paused at the door. What about Julian Carter, the co-beneficiary of the $900,000 diversion? Sebastian's expression flickered, the only sign of vulnerability I had ever seen from him. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He's my mother's younger brother, 12 years my senior. After my father's passing, he seized 1/3 of Foundation operational control, made reckless high-risk investments, and accumulated massive debt. Ethan was his connection to university research funding. That stolen $900,000 was his final attempt to avoid bankruptcy. Will you protect him? I will make him repay every cent he owes. Sebastian's voice held no warmth, no mercy. Death would be too easy an escape. I exited the office, my hand brushing the door handle. Sebastian's voice stopped me one last time. Do you know why I chose you, Clara? Because I'm convenient and affordable? He laughed softly, a genuine, rare sound. The tension in his shoulders eased, and for a moment he looked almost boyish. Because you're unafraid. He met my eyes steadily. Everyone else approaches me with either flattery or fear. You evaluate me, just as I evaluate you. I smiled faintly. Third rule of academia, I said before stepping out. Never let your opponents see you analyzing their weaknesses. The new independent laboratory's PI office was smaller than I expected, but the view was unparalleled. Directly across the skyline stood the old Life Sciences building's 6th-floor lab, where I had once worked tirelessly. I often stood at the window, watching the new doctoral student at my old workstation watering the potted green plant, unaware of the long history attached to that simple pot. The plant had recovered, its leaves once again crisp and upright, reaching toward the sunlight. Miss Bennett. My assistant knocked gently and entered. Ethan's verdict came through today. 3.5 years incarceration, $60,000 fine, permanent academic blacklisting. I nodded silently. The news should have felt like triumph, but instead it settled over me like a quiet contentment, the satisfaction of a job completed thoroughly. Ava Brooks is downstairs, the assistant continued hesitantly. She's requesting a meeting with you. I checked my watch. Grant her 10 minutes. Ava appeared drastically changed in just 3 months. Her once sleek styled hair was dry and unkempt, her designer wardrobe replaced with plain discounted retail clothing. She sat across from me, twisting her fingers nervously in her lap, her entire demeanor stripped of former arrogance. The diamond nails were gone, replaced by bare, bitten fingertips. I came to apologize, she whispered shakily, tears welling in her eyes. There's no need. I pushed a glass of water toward her. You owe me nothing. I said terrible things about you, she choked out. I accused you of sleeping your way up, called you horrible names. You spoke half-truths. I leaned back in my chair calmly. I did advance my career through Sebastian Grant's recognition, just not through unprofessional favors. In academia, independent women who refuse to accept unfair treatment are always labeled aggressive or immoral. Tears spilled down her cheeks. She wiped at them with the back of her hand, smearing the remnants of old mascara across her cheekbone. Ethan had private videos of me, she admitted brokenly. I had no choice but to obey him. He forced me to spy on you, install monitoring software on your computer, report every move you made. I know. Ava froze completely. I discovered the spyware the first night you installed it, I explained quietly. Your program was rudimentary, leaving constant firewall error logs. I noticed immediately. Then why didn't you expose me back then? I was waiting. I pulled a backup USB drive from my desk drawer and set it on the table. Waiting for conclusive proof, waiting for their violations to compound beyond repair, waiting until I gained enough power to defend myself without wasting energy on meaningless petty conflicts. Ava stared at the drive like it held her entire future. I've triple-backed up all surveillance records across independent secure servers, I told her firmly. As long as you never interfere with me or my work again, none of this will ever surface. She tremblingly tucked the drive into her bag and stood to leave. Clara, she paused at the door, voice fragile. Do you hate me? I considered the question honestly. I thought about all the times she'd mocked me, all the whispered insults and public humiliations. I thought about the spyware, the surveillance, the betrayal of someone I'd once considered a colleague, if not quite a friend. I did once, I replied calmly. But I don't have time for hatred anymore. I manage 27 lab researchers, oversee 3 national grant applications, and oversee high-stakes journal publication covenants. My life is far too busy for resentment. The door closed behind her. I opened my laptop and finalized an email draft addressed to Julian Carter. Subject: Formal Debt Restructuring Proposal. Body: 3 p.m. Wednesday. Bring legal counsel. No late attendance accepted. My phone buzzed moments later with a message from Fiona. Asterisk team dinner tonight to celebrate your 100-day anniversary at the foundation. You in? Asterisk. I glanced out the window at the old familiar lab building, its 6th floor lights finally dark at the end of another workday. Somewhere in that building, a new generation of researchers was probably staying late, working hard, dreaming of the future. I hoped they were smarter than I'd been. I hoped they said no more often than I had. I'm in. I typed back. Invite Sebastian too. Wait, he never attends casual team dinners. Tell him Clara Bennett is treating. I smiled faintly. 3 strikes rule. No more second chances. 2 seconds later, Fiona sent a laughing reply. Wow. You're bold enough to command Sebastian Grant's schedule now. It's not command. I grabbed my bag and headed for the elevator. It's evaluation. 4th rule of professional advancement. Always assess your superior's strengths and weaknesses, exactly as you assess your competitors. The elevator numbers descended steadily. 28, 27, 26. My phone vibrated again. A single reply from Sebastian. Send address. I forwarded the location to Fiona with a short note. Asterisk he's coming. Prepare for gossip. Asterisk. Stepping out of the high-rise lobby, cool river breeze washed over me, carrying the faint moisture of the waterfront. City neon lights flickered to life one by one along the shoreline, illuminating the endless bustle of urban life. Taxis honked, pedestrians hurried past, and somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed and faded. I thought back to that desperate night years ago, staring at spilled lab-staining liquid and feeling helpless and small. Back then, I could never have imagined that every late night of silent labor, every meticulously preserved record, every moment of swallowed injustice would one day connect into an unbreakable safety net. Once I was a fish trapped in others' nets. Now I am the one weaving the threads. My phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Director Larson's voice came through the line, awkward and tentative. Clara, the school would like to invite you back for a guest lecture. Academic career planning for new students. My consulting rate is $700 per hour. Official advance booking required. I interrupted calmly. There was a stunned pause, followed by a helpless laugh. You've changed completely. No. I leaned back against the taxi I had hailed. I've simply grown teeth. I ended the call and rolled down the window, letting the night wind rush through my hair. The city lights blurred past as the taxi merged into traffic, carrying me toward a restaurant where my new team was waiting. Somewhere in the distance, I could see the old life sciences building growing smaller in the rearview mirror, its lights dimming as the night deepened. The city still bustled relentlessly. There were still young researchers staying up late, still people silently enduring unfair treatment, still souls apologizing for mistakes not their own. The world hadn't changed just because I had. It was still the same system, the same pressures, the same unspoken rules that rewarded the ruthless and punished the kind. But that was no longer my story. 3 strikes. I have long since outlasted the 3.